Okay. Hello, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Hi everyone. Let's look in the chat. Amazing. Okay, so this is the board running training Zoom call. We are just getting set up. Sorry, we're running 2 whole minutes late. Barney is helping me with tech. Pin video there. Okay, amazing. Hi everyone. Does everyone want to introduce yourselves in the chat? Click those 3 little buttons at the bottom, get it up on the side. Hi Lorena, hi Julia. Tell us all where you're from while we're waiting for any latecomers to join. Maybe tell us, have you been out canvassing in this election so far, or are you just getting stuck in now? How's it all going? Hello, Ali from Sydenham, London. Hi, Nadav from London. Ian from Germany. Oh, brilliant. Hi, Esther from Walthamstow. Cool. Okay. I think we're probably just about ready to get started. Thank you so much for joining. Amazing to have you all. So this call is going to be all about how to run a canvassing board. And yeah, so if you haven't got the chat open yet, make sure you open up the chat box because Barney is going to be posting lots of useful links in there, things you need to see. You can do this by clicking on the chat icon, which is a speech bubble with 3 little dots in it. If you're calling in by phone, unfortunately, you won't be able to use the chat box, but don't worry, we still know you're there, and it's really great you've been able to call in, and we'll send all the key links through by email later, so don't worry if you can't see it now. Okay, so let's get started. We now have exactly 7 days until the general election. The options before us could not be clearer. We've got disaster capitalism with Boris Johnson or transformative socialism with Jeremy Corbyn. We don't have billionaire backers or friends in the mainstream media. Our power is Labour's hundreds of thousands of members having hundreds of conversations all across the country. And this time we really can win. It's so exciting. We've got thousands of amazing volunteers out knocking on doors for socialism, so many of them first timers. And to make full use of all of that energy and all of those new canvassers, we really need a whole army of new board runners as well. You know, you need about 1 board runner for every 6 canvassers. And if we've got thousands new canvassers, we need thousands new board runners. So it's amazing that you guys are all up for taking on some new skills, figuring out what's going on with running a board. So we're going to walk you through it. And I'm going to show you all a presentation about this. If I can figure out how to share my screen, which I think I can do. Sorry, 1 second. How is that looking for everyone? Cool. So when you're all trained up, you're all ready to run a board, first thing, go to your canvassing session, let the people at the start know that you know how to run a board. Find a board runner who's already there, find whoever the contact point is for the session, and let them know that you know how to run a board. They might be really, really happy, you know, they might hand you something immediately and give you 6 people and tell you to go off, or they might say, that's okay, we think we have enough people. You never know, but you know, make sure you put yourself out there and make sure you let them know that you can pick up a board, because a lot of the CLPs might not be ready or might not know about the skills people have. So first thing, let people know. Second thing, do a good job running a board. So to do this, I think it's quite useful to think a little bit about what's the point of going canvassing, what are you trying to achieve by running your board. So you want to pick up data, You want your board runners to communicate Labour's message, and you want to identify local issues. And you want to sort of get your canvassers to realise that and make sure they can do it effectively. Your job is to manage your little team. So what are you doing? You're recording their data and you're managing your little team of canvassers. So first thing you do, find your team. So you want a mix of people who are new, people who are really experienced, so that they can talk to each other, share skills and experience, but also just try and find something that works well, right? If you've got a big group of people who've come with their friends, then let them stay with their friends, right? We've promised everyone lots and lots of times that canvassing is fun and easy, so it's your job to make it fun and easy for them. Then once you've got your team, you want to give everyone your phone number so they can contact you if they get lost. Don't want to be leaving anyone behind. If it's anyone's first time or they're especially nervous, give them a buddy, make sure people are matched up, and take a minute before you start canvassing to make sure that your team know what they're doing, what the point of this session is, what kind of voters they might be talking to. Whoever's leading the whole canvas session may well have already done a briefing, but just have a quick check over with your team that they're happy and they know what they're going to be doing. Then, when you're actually canvassing, what's going to be in your bag, what's going to be on the board, what are the things you're going to be dealing with. So most important thing is the voter ID sheet. I'm going to show you an example of this in a second, but these are where you're going to record all the data you're going to gather, and this is also the sheets that are going to tell you where you need to go and which doors you need to knock on. So then you're going to have a clipboard or a ring binder that those sheets are in. I think that ring binders are so much better. I'm very sorry if you have clipboards, they're fast. You might have a sign-in sheet. You'll have out cards, which will be some kind of leaflet that you've got to give to your canvassers to put through doors of anyone who's not in when they knock. Pens and pencils, Labour stickers. Make sure that all of your canvassers have got a Labour sticker if they want one. There should be a map at the start of your board which will have highlighted on it the round that you're going to go. You might have a local briefing. You might have Labour Party membership forms, amazing if you find someone who's really, really, really keen. You'll have some window posters. What I think is really great at the start of a canvass, if you do have some window posters on your board, is to give them out to your canvassers before you start canvassing and set a challenge for whether any of your canvassers can persuade anyone to put up a window poster. So make sure that your canvassers know that that's an option, that they're not just recording data, they can also be asking people for something a little bit more. So, as promised, this is an example of a voter ID sheet. You may notice that it is not real data because that would not be allowed, but this is just an example to show you what it looks like, to show you what goes where, to show you what you need to do with it. So, there's a few things highlighted on here. Right at the top here, can you all see my mouse pointing at things? We've got the street name. So when you first open up a board, what you probably want to do is look at your first address on your board, and if you don't know the area, maybe stick it into a maps app on your phone or something. Ask someone in your group to look it up and walk over to the first address you need to go to. So that would be the road. And then at the bottom of each entry, you've got each individual address. So these are the addresses that you're going to be handing out to your canvassers. Then you've got the names of all the voters registered to vote at that address. You've got whatever data we have from last time we spoke to that voter about how they voted in the last election or what they said last time we knocked on their door. If anyone's a postal voter, you'll have it noted down that they're a postal voter. If anyone is a Labour member, you'll have it noted down that they're a Labour member. And it really is still worth knocking on the doors of Labour members, because we don't just want to ask people to vote for us, we also want to say to them, hey, you know, we have the biggest polling day operation in years to go through. We need every single member to be out there taking part in it. So ask members whether they're active and whether they would come join you next time. Then along this side here, you also have the boxes for data entry. And you'll often have more than one box, but it's only really the first set of boxes that's particularly important. So in the first set of boxes, you're going to note down if your canvasser picks up some data from that voter, if the voter tells your canvasser that they're going to vote Labour, amazing. We want to know that so that on polling day we can go remind them to vote. So you will write down in this box a little code, and this little code will say how the voter is planning to vote. Don't worry about memorizing the codes. I'm going to show you them on the next slide, but do not feel that you need to memorize them because they will be printed on every single board, and you don't need to use all the codes. There's some voters who it's very rare that you will ever see. And then you've got a few other boxes for the other questions that might be up here at the top of the board. So maybe the second question is, what was the person's previous voting intention? Or it might be that you've got another suggested question from whoever's leading the canvas saying, asking a crunch question like, at the end of the day, would you prefer to see a Conservative government or a Labour government? So you might have a little yes, no in box 3, but those boxes hardly ever come into play. You're only really looking at the first box, which is how you're going to vote in this election. Then the voters' phone numbers, if we have their phone numbers, will sometimes be on the door sheet. These are fake phone numbers. Please don't look them up and call them. And the phone numbers are useful if, maybe your canvasser comes back and says, this voter seemed persuadable, they would like to speak to the candidate. You can note that down on the board and ask the candidate to give them a ring. You might notice that there's a bit of blank space on this board. Maybe there's some stuff that doesn't quite fit into just the regular data that you're recording that your canvassers might hear that you think it would be really useful for the candidate to know, like someone who, for example, wants a visit from the candidate. Just jot that down on the side in the blank space, and people will really value that you've helped them out like that. I'm just going to stop for a second and ask you guys, are there any questions about the board or sort of what it looks like from anyone? I've got to figure out how I can see questions while I am looking at the thing. Okay, cool. Looks like there's not any questions about this. So the codes, L for Labour, T for Tory, S I think stands for SDP, which is the party that the Lib Dems became. Someone who just says they're not voting Labour, but they don't tell you who they're voting for. That's just against. A. X for won't say, D for don't know, Z for non-voter. Don't feel that you need to memorize these. It will be printed on the board and it will be pretty easy. Most of the time you're just using Labour or don't know or against. Those are the only ones that you really use and they're quite intuitive. So then, you know what your board looks like. Time to start canvassing. So what do? You've picked your team, you've briefed everyone, you've given out their stickers, you've got to the first address, you know what your board looks like. So you assign addresses from your board sheet to your volunteers, and you want to write down the volunteers' initials next to the door that you've just assigned them. So on the sheet, see next to this 75, if someone had assigned this to me, then they'd put a little H for Holly there next to it. And the reason for doing this is that I guarantee you, when your canvassers come back to tell you whether they've got any data or not, they will have forgotten which door you sent them to. This always happens, but it's fine because you've written their initials next to the last door you sent them to, so you'll know where they were. And it also means that if anyone gets stuck on the door for a really long time and you want to, check on them, make sure they're okay, send someone else back to go get them to make sure they don't get lost, you know where you've sent them. So it's really helpful. So you assign the doors, you note it down, you send people off. Then They're going to come back to you. They might have data, they might not have data. Maybe they've come back really quick because no one was home. If they don't have data, you want to send them out again as quickly as you possibly can. So if a few people come back to you all at once, ask, is there anyone who doesn't have data? And make everyone who does have data wait while you give the person with no data a new door to go knock on. And so then take the data from anyone who had data, note it down clearly on the board. We want it to be, really reliable data, easy for people to read. Note it down, send people back out again, rinse and repeat, carry on. You want to try and make the whole thing quick. You want to be snappy, you want to be encouraging and, share stories with people, ask them how it's going. But mostly you want to be efficient as much as possible. So as you're walking along a street or through a block, try to stay a bit ahead of your group of canvassers so that people aren't having to walk back to you and then back to the doors a lot. So make sure you're always ahead of them. If people have data or they want to tell you a story about a really funny person they just spoke to, then walk and talk. Make them come forwards to where you are, all stuff to keep it moving along smoothly and efficiently. That's your aim all the time. But if people do have stories, or they've got a great, they've convinced someone who's been a lifelong Tory voter that they're going to vote Labour this time, then let all your other canvassers know that. Celebrate those wins. Remember, canvassing is fun and easy. It's your job as the board runner to make it fun and easy for everyone in your group. So celebrate those wins, ask people how it's going, check in with them. If someone's stuck on a door for too long, send someone back to go get them. Yeah, very simple, all quite easy tips. Quick note here about canvassing in blocks, because it can be slightly different. First and most important principle of canvassing in blocks is don't be a nuisance to the people in the block. So that means don't have your whole canvassing group all come stand outside someone's front door or in the middle of an echoey stairwell and loudly chat to each other, like that loud beeping noise I'm sure you all just heard. Very annoying to be interrupted by stuff. So yeah, don't all gather right outside someone's door, chat in places that are echoey. Really, you want to assign all the doors before you walk into the block and then have a smaller group go in. I've just seen a question. How do you record no answer? That's a really good question. You just don't need to write anything in the box. If someone didn't answer, you didn't get any data. There's nothing to write. Yeah, great question. Thank you. That was important to cover. So blocks, don't gather in echoey places, don't make too much noise. We want to convince voters to like us and to vote Labour. We don't want to annoy them and put them off. And then also some estates can be really complicated. Don't worry about it too much. If you need a second to figure out where your addresses actually are, just stay calm, don't get flustered. If you see like an estate map on a sign somewhere, that's really helpful. Maybe take a picture of it, use it to figure out where your addresses are. But don't worry if you need a second to figure it out. We've all canvassed in blocks that just make no sense at all for the floor numberings or the door numbers or something like that. Everyone will understand. So that's pretty much it. A few golden rules is to keep it simple and brief, get the data first, hear the stories after, try and stay fast, ahead of the pack, walk in front of where your canvassers are. Remember people's first names. I haven't really covered that yet. So just try and remember your canvassers' first names, but also when you're assigning a door to one of your canvassers, tell your canvassers a bit about the person whose door they're going to knock on. Tell them the first names, tell them the previous voting intention, tell them whether that person is a Labour member, or if they're a postal voter and you want your canvasser to go ask them whether they've already voted. Let them know all this information that you have on the board, and encourage your canvassers when they're getting data back from people, always ask who they're speaking to, because that's really important. If your canvasser just comes back and says, oh, I spoke to a woman, didn't catch her name, she says she's voting Labour, but everyone else in the house votes Tory, and then you look at your board and there's 3 women's names on there, that's not useful data, because there's only one of those people who we need to go remind to vote on polling day, and we have to know which person it is, because we don't want to be reminding Tory voters to vote on polling day. So stress to your canvassers that you need to get first names. And some people can be a bit shy about asking for first names. I think a really good tip for doing this is don't ask for first name right at the start of the conversation. Ask right at the end when the voter's a bit more warmed up. Say, you know, lovely to speak to you. By the way, my name is Holly. I didn't quite catch yours. Or remind me of what yours was, that kind of thing. Let your canvassers know that. Really important, we need people's names. And then 4th golden rule, we need accurate information, fill it in clearly. If we get someone's contact details, then write their contact details on the board. That's really, really valuable data for us. And that's pretty much it. Have fun canvassing. I'm gonna go back through and see if there's any questions. Okay, if people have a no cold caller sign, yes. If people have a no cold caller sign, then maybe put a little note on the board saying that they had a no cold caller sign, and your canvassers shouldn't really knock on those doors, because you don't know why the person has that sign. You want to respect their wishes. Although opinion does split over whether you should put a leaflet into a letterbox that has a no junk mail sign. I firmly believe that our leaflets are not junk mail and that it's fine to put them into those letterboxes. But if one of your canvassers feels differently, then that's fine. Yeah, Lisa, that's only marketing. You're right. We're not marketing. You know, we're out here to achieve socialism, change the world, which is a very different thing than advertising. Okay, what additional information should we capture, says Nadav, e.g. councillor or candidate coming back, or where we feel it would annoy them to knock on their door again? This is a really good question. So if your canvasser comes back and says, you know, I think that person was really persuadable, I think that person would really like to speak to the candidate, then note that kind of thing down on the board. Feel free to note it down on the board if you think the person would be really annoyed at someone else knocking on their door. It's sort of up to you to use your discretion there. I mean, a lot of people sort of do different things, and that's fine. Let me scroll through and look for any other questions. Any other questions? Any other questions from anyone? Get them typed out quickly while we're here. What is the house covered in Labour posters? Is it still worth knocking? Yes. Yeah. You know, ask them if they're out canvassing with you. If they're not, ask them why not. But then, you know, if you're pushed for time, it's obviously not one to prioritise. Lisa says, beware of time wasters. This is a really, really, really good point. I mentioned before, you know, if you feel that one of your canvassers has been stuck on a door for too long, then go back and get them. You know, too long is probably anything longer than 10 minutes or so, or maybe even 5 minutes. And warn your canvassers beforehand that if they're stuck in a conversation, then they can just leave. And if they feel that they're not actually persuading anyone, that someone is just wasting their time, then tell them that they can say, thank you, it was lovely speaking to you, have a nice day, and walk away. You know, don't spend 10 minutes speaking to someone who's definitely going to vote Conservative and has always voted Conservative, and equally don't waste 10 minutes talking to someone who's definitely going to vote Labour and has always voted Labour, about how much you both love the Labour Party. Anne says, I missed the beginning because her browser wasn't supported. Is it recorded? Yes, it is recorded. Don't worry, Anne. It will go up. Probably not immediately, but yes, it is recorded. Julia is asking about the phone app. That is a great question. So there is a phone app for board running, and it does make things easier. But the problem is that it has to be supported by the CLP of the place where you're canvassing, and you need to get some login details that are sort of through the CLPs. So the reason we're not doing a detailed training on that is because not very many CLPs are using them. So it's quite likely that where you're going, you won't actually be able to use the doorstep app. But if you are, then great. Just ask one of the CLP contacts about how exactly you enter everything in the doorstep app. And then all the principles about making people wait if they have data and staying ahead of the pack, that all applies regardless of how you are using the data. Marcella says, I was canvassing and there were lots of buildings we couldn't get into. In that case, is it worth trying to get canvassers to talk to people through the intercom? Yes, it is definitely worth trying to get canvassers to talk to people through the intercom. If you're having trouble getting into blocks, it's always useful to have a look on your board, see if there's anyone in that block who is a Labour member, or who you'd have a phone number for, or you can check with the organisers of the canvassing session if they have a phone number for them who could get them in. And yeah, so just try, but it's not always possible, and don't worry too much. Let the organisers of the canvassing session know if you had a board with a lot of blocks that were just impossible to get into, because that's good for them to know about as well. Eleanor asks, someone says they're voting Conservative. When do you move on and when do you push? Yeah, it can be hard to tell when you can persuade someone and when you can't persuade someone. But it's something that I think, especially as we move towards the end of the campaign, on polling day, don't be wasting your time trying to convince anyone. Day before polling day, a bit less. But right now, about a week before, we're in a really important point where a lot of people are undecided and a lot of people are just making their minds up. So it is still worth your time speaking to people if you can persuade them. We've got some other training sessions on persuasive conversations. Some of them are recorded, some of them are on our YouTube. I can make sure that we send the links to those around in the follow-up email. And that has a bit of detail about when you think someone could be persuadable. I mean, a lot of the time it's just, ask them whether they've always voted Conservative, that kind of thing. But yeah, use your discretion and think a little bit about how close you are to polling day. Okay, someone else asks, can I just give the canvasser the whole sheet? So usually no, I would say. So the sheets that you've got, those are really valuable data. They've got a lot of people's personal data on them. It needs to be quite tightly protected who has those sheets. It needs to be made sure that they're returned at the end of the session and that none of that data goes astray anywhere. So you shouldn't really be giving out sheets. Occasionally you might have a board that will have a sheet that has a road that's a bit separate to the other roads on your list that might only have one address on it. In that case, it's probably fine to just give one canvasser that sheet and make sure you get it back from them at the end. But yeah, the really important thing is to make sure you get it back at the end. We've got the Seer has given us some great advice from Angela Rayner. Get our vote out and we win. Any apathy or excuses and we lose. Focus on the key issues, the NHS, schools, sensible Brexit. Completely agree. Speak to people about those key issues. Speak to them about your experiences. Speak to them about your personal stories of where we want to be. And your personal stories of what's happened to you because of this government, all that kind of thing. Yeah, exciting. Okay, the link for this recording should go up on our YouTube page, and I can make sure that it goes around in the follow-up email, but it won't go up straight away. There will be a little delay on that. Any final questions from anyone? Keep them coming. You've had amazing questions so far. Oh, thank you, Lorena. It is simple and fun. That is the main thing with canvassing. simple, fun. Yeah, so get out there. It's not difficult. Have all that fun. I can't wait. It was lovely to speak to you all. Bye.